panelists tonight for you who will talk about every aspect of the film. And I want to introduce them now to you. The flow of the evening is I'm going to make my introductions, and then I'm going to hand the interviewing over to my colleague, Professor Dr. Anna Branch, whom I will introduce in a second. And then Karen Small, the managing director of the Alan and Joan Bildner Center for the Study of Jewish Life, will deal with the Q&A from the audience towards the end of the program. So you're going to see quite a few people here on your screens. All of you are muted at this point. If you want to ask a question, please ask it in the chat. And for those of you who haven't seen the film, although we hope many of you have, you are able to do that through various streaming platforms. So this discussion will heighten your enjoyment of seeing the film again or just seeing it for the first time. It's an extraordinary piece of art and very topical to today. So let me introduce our panelists. First, I want to introduce Ron Stallworth. Ron was the first African-American and youngest detective in the Colorado Springs Police Department. He infiltrated the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1970s. In 2014, he published BlacKkKlansman, a memoir about his undercover investigation of the KKK, and the book reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Charlie Wachtel, David Rabinowitz, and some other writers, but Charlie and David are here with us tonight, were instrumental in bringing the book to the attention of Jordan Peele and Spike Lee, who adapted it to the critically acclaimed film BlacKkKlansman. David Rabinowitz and Charlie Wachtel are Academy Award-winning co-writers of the Spike Lee film BlacKkKlansman. They are both native sons. They are both from East Brunswick, New Jersey. Both of them continue to write together, and they're currently penning an action thriller, which is called Animal, and it's been optioned, I guess, by 20th Century Studios and Berlanti Productions, and it's an adaptation of the book by the New York Times bestseller author Casey Sherman. I'm sure they'll be happy to pitch that at the end. And finally, I want to introduce my colleague, Dr. Anna Branch. She's the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, and a professor of sociology here at Rutgers, New Brunswick. She provides strategic leadership to nurture and cultivate diversity and inclusion as key institutional values, strengthening Rutgers' commitment to a diverse community on and off campus. Many of you know that Rutgers is an extremely diverse university located in New Jersey with, again, a very, very diverse student population, I'm proud to say. Anna is a nationally recognized sociologist, and her work has been focused on issues of racial and gender inequality and redressing them. She's co-author of the new book, Black in America, The Paradox of the Color Line 2020, the editor of Pathways, Potholes, and the Persistence of Women in Science, Reconsidering the Pipeline 2016, and the author of a book entitled Opportunity Denied, Limiting Black Women to Devalued Work 2011, a very accomplished scholar. So as I said, Anna Branch will be conducting the interview, and then my colleague Karen Small, the managing director of the Alan and Joan Bildner Center, will pick it up at the end with the Q&A. I welcome all of you to a very, very important and topical discussion of a super great film. And I'm so delighted to have the memoirist, Ron Stallworth, and the co-screenwriters, David Rabinowitz and Charlie Wachtel, here with us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good evening, all. I am delighted to kick off this part of the conversation. I'm going to dig right in because there's so much to talk about and so little time. So I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to start with Charlie and David and then to you, Ron, and feel free to pick up on other parts of the conversation where you say, I want to add something they said. So let's start with, how did we get here? So Charlie and David, how did you learn about Ron's story and kind of go around the process of licensing it for the big screen?
Yeah, well, first off, we didn't get the rights to it. We never licensed it. Which was very scary for us in the beginning, because we were just these, two nobodies with, no reputation. And to go about doing that, you have to sort of build trust with people you're working with Ron and his manager. But it all started in 2015 when we stumbled upon this Vice article. I think there was a Vice article and maybe an article in the Daily News of the BlacKkKlansman. And we saw this Vice article. There was an interview of Ron, and we were like, you know, this is a movie. But we were worried because, you know, there was so much press on this already. There were like, you know, Hollywood's probably, you know, gotten wind of this, and, you know, we're not going to be able to, we have no shot at even, you know, being in the conversation. Luckily, that wasn't the case. And what we did is we ordered the book on Kindle, and we read the book. And inside the book, there were in the book jacket, there was this email address for the publisher, Police and Fire Publishing. And we sent an email to the publisher and said, hey, we're really interested. We're these two nobody screenwriters from Los Angeles, and we, you know, want to adapt this. And this is a little bit of why we're interested, and we're very, very passionate, and et cetera, et cetera. And one thing led to the next, and we got put in touch with Ron's manager, and then we got put in touch with Ron, luckily. And we essentially just, you know, put together this one sheet of our vision for how we wanted to adapt this into a movie, because you'd have to make some changes along the way. The book was, you know, very much written, you know, kind of like a police report. And there were some liberties that we would want to take to sort of Hollywoodize it. And, you know, right from the moment we started talking with Ron, you know, because initially we were like, okay, well, you know, is this guy going to be difficult to work with? He's the subject. He's also the author. But Ron was, you know, great the entire way through. We essentially had a handshake agreement that we would adapt his book into a screenplay. Like I said, we didn't have the rights. We didn't have the money to pay for the rights. And yeah, we just kind of winged it from there. We put together this contract that sort of like set the rules for the boundaries for our relationship, and we signed off on it. I don't think we involved lawyers or anything at that time. We were just sort of stumbling ahead, and we
ask Ron his take on that. And I see they were having a mute issue with David's tech, and hopefully we'll get that sorted. So Ron, your take, when you were initially heard that there was an interest in making a movie based on your story, what was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I had, when this book was first published on Police and Fire Publishing, I had about 3 pages of inquiries from Hollywood writers, producers, directors. Some of them were big names, people involved in some Star Wars movies, Star Trek movies. There were some big names. And I initially signed a contract with the Gotham groups, people that made the Maze Runner series. They had the book for a year with the option for 6 more months. They had to show development towards it becoming a movie to exercise that option. Well, long story short, in that year's time, they did nothing with my story. So I got my option rights back, and shortly thereafter, entered Charlie and David. At that point in time, I was getting a little bit disgusted with the Hollywood scene because I was hearing a lot of talk but no action. So here these 2 guys come. Charlie in particular was a pain in the neck because he placed a call to me while I was traveling, and we got disconnected 5 times because I was going over a mountain pass, but he persistently continued to call, kept calling me back, and to his credit, it all turned out good. But when we finally talked, Charlie told me their vision. I put them in touch with my manager. My manager was the one that suggested we enter into a contract with them what's called a spec script, where they write the screenplay. I would have control over it before they could do anything, and I would have some say in it, and we went from there. The funny thing was, I asked them, I said, what have you guys done? And they basically said nothing. And we got a chuckle out of that. But these guys were very determined. I had faith in them. I had confidence in them. I didn't really know where to go from there because this was my first rendezvous with Hollywood Club, and it all worked out for the better.
Awesome. So David, I want to ask you, how did you go from nothing, as Ron and Charlie described, to Spike Lee? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's pretty crazy. Long story short is, just like Ron and Charlie said, the three of us started working together to adapt Ron's memoir. And while this was happening, Charlie mentioned that we were working on this thing to a producer friend of his, a guy named Sean Reddick. Sean got interested, and he had us come in and pitch it, do a quick 15-minute pitch on what this project and this story is going to be. And they said, great, we're working on this thing called Get Out with Jordan Peele. That was 2015. No one knew what Get Out was at the time. They didn't even know. And so we love Jordan Peele. So we said, that great. And soon enough, once we had a draft of the script that the three of us were happy with, we gave it to Sean, and Sean gave it to Jordan, and Jordan became our producer. And then when Get Out became the sleeper hit of 2017, overnight Jordan Peele becomes the most sought after filmmaker in Hollywood, and we were his next project. So Jordan gave the script to Spike. And once Spike got on board, the movie was happening.
Very cool, very cool. So another question connected to that, David, or Charlie, I'm sorry, you hinted at this, that the book was written much more like a police report, and you need to take some liberties to Hollywoodize it, as you described. What was that like? And so I'm gonna ask that question for you and David to answer. And then Ron, since you okayed it, I'm curious, what was your take on the changes that were made? Go ahead.
Yeah, the facts of life don't usually fit perfectly into a 3-act structure. So it's incumbent upon us as screenwriters to figure out a way to make that work and to create something that can be cinematic and thrilling, and something that people would want to go to the movie theaters and actually see. What we did with the bomb plot, there wasn't, an actual planting of a bomb in real life, but there was a lot of talk about it. So what we did with the script is kind of an extrapolation of all of the recorded conversations that Ron was picking up on with Chuck in these meetings. And of course they were, taking these, threats of bombing Black churches and gay bars very seriously. And, if you're Ron, you have to take these seriously. And we wanted to take these as seriously as possible so that, if these were to happen, then, let's, fire up the urgency as much as possible.
And that was, the first big change. But then the other big change right off the bat was making Ron's partner Jewish. So in real life, Ron calls him Chuck in the book. And we just decided, really as a practical storytelling device, at first to make him Jewish, just because this guy was going to be going undercover. We wanted to add that layer of tension. Also, the fact that both of us are Jewish just seemed like a natural fit. And I remember being a little bit nervous when we broached these subjects to Ron, these two major changes right off the bat to his true life story. But to his credit, Ron went for them.
I might add that the Jewish angle, I was really sold on it when Charlie pitched it to me, because I asked him, I says, what is your vision for my story? And he said, we'd like to change make the Chuck character Jewish because David and I are Jewish. And he said, that will add some tension when he's having meetings with the Klansmen, the fact that they don't like Jews. And I thought about that, and I said, I like that. And I told him, I said, run with it. And I was very pleased with how it turned out.
Absolutely. So both Dave and Charlie, I want you to talk about that a bit more explicitly, right? Because you say it's just to add some tension. And there are levels of sophistication and understanding for folks about why it adds tension. So can you speak a little bit more to that? Please take it away.
Sure. Well, first off, many people don't know this, but Dave and I, we met actually in Hebrew school in like 6th grade in East Brunswick. So we go way back, and I think kind of making the character of Chuck, who became Flip, Jewish, was sort of like our way into the story. But it was, a practical decision as well, because if you're going to have the main character, Ron, not be able, of course, to be present in these KKK meetings, you've got to keep it cinematic. We're going to be with this other guy, Chuck, who became Flip, and you got to have a personal investment, a personal stake in these scenes to keep it dramatic. And making him Jewish, giving him that personal stake, having something that he and Ron could both, inside of them, be wanting to exact some kind of poetic revenge against the Klan is something that we really needed.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that insight. Ron, question for you. So were your fellow officers as cooperative as they were depicted in the film? Or were there professional struggles, disagreements as the investigation progressed?
The investigation itself was led by me. It was my case. I was the one that had all the ideas that you see depicted in the film of talking to him on the phone and whatnot. Obviously, I couldn't go to face-to-face meetings. And I'm the one that came up with the plan to get a white officer to pose as me. People always ask, why didn't you just turn it over to Chuck in the first place? Chuck was a narcotics detective and he had his own caseload. I was an intelligence detective. This was an intelligence investigation. And I had already met the president of the KKK chapter over the phone and had stupidly introduced myself by my real name. So that was already set in motion and there was no turning back on that. So I had to get a white officer posing as me for the face-to-face meetings. And when I went to Chuck, Chuck was in from the very beginning, but I had to go through his lieutenant, who quite frankly didn't like me. And the lieutenant told me it won't work. I said, why? He says, the minute Chuck walks into the room with these guys, they'll know by his voice that he's not the black man that they were talking to on the phone. And that's when I asked, how does a black man sound? The white lieutenant could not explain that. He just stared at me. And I had to overcome that racial bias on his part, the stereotype, and he still wouldn't buy into it after I explained everything to him and confronted him on this. But he told me, you can't have him. I'm not going to waste one of my good undercovers for a bunch of nonsense guys running around in white sheets. So quite frankly, he pissed me off. So that's when I went to my sergeant, and my sergeant and I took it directly to the chief of police, bypassing the chain of command. And I told the chief what I had done and what I wanted. The chief called the lieutenant up and ordered him to give me all the cooperation I needed, anything that I needed. And that's how the investigation moved forward.
Wow, that's quite the story, quite the experience. I can't imagine that engendered a lot of friendliness from that lieutenant and others.
Well, the lieutenant hated me to begin with, so that didn't really bother me. I just deepened it a little bit. But from that moment on, my career was in jeopardy as far as my relationship with him. And ultimately, it was the conflict in that relationship that led to my leaving the Colorado Springs Police Department in 1980, a year after this investigation ended. But that was a very serious moment in terms of overcoming. I was putting my career in jeopardy because we bypassed the chain of command. There were 4 or 5 steps in between my sergeant and then the chief, and we bypassed all those steps to get to the chief and get him to move this investigation forward. He passed away several months ago. Bless his heart, rest in peace. But I was always grateful for him for believing in me and for allowing this investigation to happen. He did, by the way, get a chance to read the book before he died. He liked the story. I don't think he saw the picture, but he did get a signed copy of the book.
Amazing, amazing. So now we're going to switch back again. We're going to back and forth between the story that's found in the memoir and the film that those of us in the public have enjoyed. And I'm curious, talking about liberties, you didn't mention this one. So tell us if this was fact or adaptation, Charlie and David. That powerful juxtaposition of the Black Student Union gathering, where they tell the story of Jesse Washington against the KKK induction ceremony. Really powerful scene. Was that real or was that an adaptation? And what were you trying to get at in that?
That was an adaptation, and it's also a testament to collaboration, because, you know, what happened with the script is once it went to Spike Lee, Spike and his writing partner, Kevin Wilmot, did their draft of the script. So in our original draft, we had the induction ceremony, and then afterwards they watch Birth of a Nation. But in our draft, it was kind of, it wasn't a big deal made out of Birth of a Nation. Spike and Kevin come in and they add the scene with the man who was played by Harry Belafonte telling this story, and then intercut it, and then include in that, instead of just they watch Birth of a Nation sort of passively, showing how engaged they are with it. So it was kind of cool to see something that we set up, which, by the way, was also from Ron's memoir. It wasn't from nothing. Taken that much further by Spike and Kevin and made into the really effective sequence that you see in the film.
I might add, when the movie got to, or when the script got to, or the book, I should say, got to Jordan, one of the things that the producer, Sean Reddick, told me, he said when Jordan got it and read it, he liked the script that Charlie and David had written, but he said, you know, we gotta make it a little more black. He said we gotta put some more black into it. So the Jesse Washington scene with Harry Belafonte, that was one effort to put more black into it.
Very cool, very cool. No.
And also just another fun fact from the book, from real life, is right after that sequence in one of the earlier drafts, you see the Klansmen going out to celebrate at a Denny's restaurant, which was supposed to be a little bit of a scene for comic relief, but they actually went there to celebrate. And Chuck, who would later become Flip, almost, got his cover blown in that scene because he had to sign the paperwork for the initiation, and he accidentally signed his real name and the N for narcotics detective before, throwing the paper away. Luckily, nobody saw the paper. He got another draft that he was able to, redo it, but it all almost fell apart there.
Wow.
And I might add, I didn't know that incident until I was told about it during my writing. I was talking to one of the guys. It wasn't Chuck, it was Jimmy. And Jimmy, James Rose, told me about signing this form and almost getting caught trying to throw it away. And the president of the chapter ultimately took it from him, didn't look at it, just took it from him. And he was the one that actually tossed it in the trash. But I didn't find this out until, almost 50 years later.
Wow. Wow, so many surreal moments. So to you, Ron, next question. You were actually assigned as David Duke's bodyguard for the KKK induction ceremony. What was that experience like?
Hilarious. The morning of David Duke's visit to Colorado Springs, my chief came to me and he told me, we're getting death threats, a lot of death threats against this man. He said, I don't want anything happening to him in my city, and I want you to be his security, get him out alive. He said, we have nobody else available, you're it. I protested as vigorously as I could, but ultimately the chief's order prevails, and I saluted and went to where David was, his hotel, introduced myself to him without giving him my last name, and told him that I had been assigned to be his bodyguard and to provide security for him during his roughly 4 to 6 hour stay in Colorado Springs. And I told him I don't agree with your philosophy or political ideology, but I will do everything within my means to get you out of my city safe. And he was very cordial, very polite, very respectful, as David naturally is, when you get past his racism and hatred for Jews and blacks. And he shook my hand. He gave me the Klan handshake, which he didn't know that I knew what it was. And you see it depicted in the film during the banquet meeting when the Klansmen are talking to him. He gave me the Klan handshake, and we left, and he started his travel around Colorado Springs with me shadowing him, and that's how that came about. It was quite hilarious.
Wow, again, so many moments, so many moments. Charlie and David, let's switch to more decisions that you made. At the end of the film, footage was added of the 2017 Unite the Right rally and the protests in Charlottesville, as well as imagery of Donald Trump, giving the film a political and provocative edge. How did you make that decision, and what was your goal?
Well, yeah, that decision actually was all Spike, and we're completely grateful for it because it seemed to really hit the right chord with everybody. Yeah.
Cool. Anything you add? I think David's frozen. I think so. Okay, I'll come back to you, David, if there's anything else that you want to add on that. Ron, I'm going to ask a reaction question. Seeing the film yourself, what did you think of John David Washington's reenactment of you? And related to that, well, I'm going to ask that first. I'll come back to the other piece. What did you think of the reenactment?
First of all, I was jealous of his afro. My afro during that time period was never quite that large and never coiffed as good as his was. So the wig that they put him into was good. I like that. Overall, John David did an excellent job portraying 25-year-old me. As he told me, he wasn't going to try to copy me, to mimic me. He said he was just going to try to capture my essence. And he captures the 25-year-old essence of me very, very well. I was very proud of his performance, very happy for the success that followed, and I'm grateful that he did justice to my story.
Excellent. So another reflection question for you. I'm going to ask you, Charlie. Reflecting on the film from conception, when you first read that Vice story, to the end and now, do you feel the film accomplished what you set out to do?
Man, yeah, I think in a sense that, you know, it became a movie. We got to go to the Oscars. Is it going to change the world? No, I don't think so. Is it hopefully going to, you know, contextualize history and help us see ourselves in a different way? Yeah, I hope it, you know, spurred some discussion and debate, and, you know, shows that racism is alive and well, and we're very, you know, complacent, if not apathetic, between now and, you know, the 1970s when all of this took place. It's just sad to see.
Coming back.
I might add something. Charlie said it's not going to change the world, but it did get under David Duke's skin, because he called me 1 week before the Brooklyn premiere, the nationwide premiere. He called me, my wife and I were in Brooklyn doing promos and a whole lot of interviews, and one day I got a phone call and it was David Duke. My number is not hard to find me if you really want to. And he called. Basically, they had just released the trailer with Topher Grace playing him, and David was upset by how Topher was capturing him. And he was trying to persuade me to persuade Spike to change that scene and all the others. We talked for about an hour, and I was able to record about, my wife was able to record about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of it. But it got under his skin, and Charlie and David can pat themselves on the back for that. They pissed off the Grand Wizard.
Question we were asking David, thanks Ron for that piece, insight. I asked David, asked Charlie, and he answered a moment ago, did the film accomplish what you set out to do? Right, when you think about what you wanted to accomplish from when you read that first Vice article, did it accomplish what you set out to do?
Oh, I would say more than we ever imagined, really. You know, when we started working on it, we joked. We had a personal joke between us that, you know, Spike Lee was going to be directing this movie. We didn't think anything was gonna, you never really think that anything like major is gonna happen with it. But we were just like, well, this is a great story, and Ron is great to work with, and let's just see where this goes. Had we known what was going to happen, I'm glad we didn't have any idea or any illusions about that, because that would have been pretty paralyzing. I'm glad that when it came out, people were talking about it, and that it was, you know, some films people enjoy, and then, you know, don't really talk about, and then some films people, they talk about, but, you know, maybe it's a little bit more like homework or like eating, you know, your vegetables. I think that in some, you know, in a lot of cases that this movie, and it's really a testament to what Spike was able to do with it, accomplishes both for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So final question before we turn it over to the audience, one for each of you. And I want to relate the movie to this moment. And so this goes to you, Ron, first. Given the Black Lives Matter movement, the current tensions, as recently as yesterday, what do you think, given your personal experience with the KKK, is the important message for today's generation to understand?
I'm very disgusted by what is going on in this country under the current leadership that we had, if you want to put the word leadership to that person. I'm very disgusted by it, and I'm very disgusted with my profession in terms of what's been going on, not just recently, but overall, where the lives of young Black males are concerned, and of recently Black females as well. The police profession is an honorable profession. It really is. But you have to have the right people in the job for it to live up to that honor. And for some reason, it's deteriorated. There are out of control cops out there. They are violating their oath to serve and protect the public. They are violating the constitutional authority that's been granted to them. And they're abusing their rights in terms of dealing with the public. I am disgusted by it, and I'm not afraid to quote the opening lyrics to that famous NWA song, "F the Police," and that's talking about my own profession, because the things that are happening is simply wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. And when I get evidence like the videos that we've seen over the past few months, when I get video evidence of this wrongdoing, there is no defense for them. I don't believe in standing by the blue wall of silence and justifying their actions or attempting to justify it. I call it like I see it, and what I have seen is wrong, period.
Thank you, Ron. Charlie and David, final question for you. Same, related to this moment. We have been talking about and had been talking about Black Lives Matter before the film, right? Thinking about the rise going into 2015. So that was a backdrop, but we weren't in the moment that we're in now. So if you think about this moment, this past summer, what do you think about how the film, and in some ways in the role of film, in sparking conversation and kind of giving it, because you've talked about this, David, it did more than just, it was more than homework. It gave people some insight, a little bit of levity, but some depth. So what do you think about the role of film and how we can use that to engage people in what can be difficult conversations where there can be some resistance?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the role of film, because that's a theme that goes through the movie itself, which we can give a lot of credit to Spike to, you know, starting the film with Gone with the Wind and having discussions throughout about film, the impact of films like Birth of a Nation, and of course ending on essentially film, although it's documentary footage. The film itself, it's sort of a commentary on the power of film. But then, you know, when we sat down to write this, I think, I don't know if we go into anything thinking specifically, oh, here's the theme of this. I think usually it kind of emerges naturally. And the finished film has so many themes. I think when we were writing it, it was more about cooperation in the face of racism, and the idea that it's not just one group's fight, that it's everyone's fight. It's everybody's responsibility. It's not one group's responsibility. It's everyone's. And I think that that's the type of, that's a theme that is sort of evergreen and is even more relevant, you know, in the last year.
Thank you. Charlie, is anything you want to add to that?
I think Dave said it the best. Can't top that.
Amazing. Karen, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. So I'll just remind everyone, if you have a question, please type it into the chat. I have actually a whole bunch here, but I'll try to summarize them. So Ron, picking up on what you were talking about with the police and individual police officers and their actions, some questions came up about, have you seen any changes in the police, particularly in Colorado Springs, since you infiltrated the KKK? And what did you do after you left the Colorado Springs department? Did you go to another police department, or what was the next stage in your journey?
Okay, as far as changes in the department after I left, as I write in the end of my book, when I joined the police department at the age of 19 in 1972, there were no blacks in any capacity. I was the only black person on the department, and I was what was called a police cadet. Basically, I was an officer in training, but I was too young to actually be a cop. And I was in that capacity for about a year and a half till I turned 21. And in the interim, they had hired 4 black officers. So when I left the department in 1980, there were no ranking officers who were black. They were all patrolmen, and one was a detective, me. And when I wrote the book, the 4th highest ranked officer in the department was a black man. He was a commander. And they had a female who was black, who was a lieutenant. They had another black female who was a sergeant. And I think 1 or 2 black males who were sergeants as well. So that is progress right there, but it took about 40 some odd years for that progress to occur. So I'm glad of that, I'm proud of that. In terms of where I went, I left the department in 1980, in part because of the conflict I had with that lieutenant I mentioned earlier. And I wanted to be an undercover cop. He didn't want me to be an undercover cop, so I sought greener pastures elsewhere. In 1980, I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and worked intelligence for a state agency there. 2 years later, I ended up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and worked undercover narcotics there for 4 years, which is an interesting tale in and of itself, Wyoming being as white a state as it is. And in 1986, the state of Utah recruited me to come work narcotics there, and I went there in 1986 with the Department of Public Safety's Narcotics and Liquor Law Enforcement Bureau, and that's where I ended my career in 2006.
Well, and I'm going to come back at the end and ask you about what you're working on now, because I've heard you're quite busy. You're quite the busy guy. But let me switch back to well, actually to everyone. An interesting question. We have a lot of educators who joined this call because we have a Holocaust Resource Center, and a lot of our teachers, I think, joined tonight. As writers, how would you introduce this topic and this film to middle school students in an urban district? how would you present the overarching idea behind the film?
That is a good question.
I think this was the first time anyone asked you this question.
Not sure I understand the question.
So do you know if any schools have used the film in an educational setting to talk about, let's say, Black relations or prejudice reduction? I think that's the meat of the question.
Not
Ask
to my
anyone.
knowledge. I would hope so. I would hope that schools use this as, an educational resource, even though it is, rated R, and, there's a lot, to show this to a middle school, a group of middle school kids, could be pretty intense for them. But you could also make the argument that, this is, vital for them to see this at a young age and get acquainted with it as just a topic for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it could be an interesting idea to show the film in conjunction with reading Ron's book. In fact, I might start with the book, and then eventually go to the movie, and that'll even spark an idea of what is a filmmaker's responsibility to true events. What's the difference between a narrative film and a documentary film? Just because I think if we're talking about middle school, it might be just more educational to start with the written word and then go to the film.
Just to jump in here, the teacher in me, you can also use clips. As opposed to thinking about the whole film, there are really important clips in that scene of the Black Student Union gathering where they're interspersing Birth of the Nation might be a really powerful one to use. So you can to think about what was going on there for some kind of critical reflection for the students and help them to unpack it. So I think there are ways to use clips to promote a conversation, to pull a chapter from the book and put them in relation to one another that are at a level that middle school students can use and grasp.
Now, I was also thinking about the relationship between Ron and Flip in the movie and the various conversations that they have. And someone actually asked the question, how did Adam Driver, if you know, feel about playing Flip Zimmerman in this film? And there were so many interesting moments with Flip coming to terms with his own identity, the made-up Flip. Any other comments about that? That might be an interesting clip to use also, I think, with students.
Let me say that Adam enjoyed the role of Flip. At least he told us that. He didn't have a lot to work with because the actual character, Chuck, in my book, Chuck did not cooperate with me when I started writing. I called him up and asked him because I wanted to get his impressions of what was happening in those face-to-face meetings outside of what I was hearing on the monitor, the police monitor, because we wired him up. But Chuck chose not to cooperate with me. He said he didn't want to have anything to do with what I was working on. And I respected his position. So I went about writing the story anyway. The only thing Adam had to work with in terms of what Chuck was and how to portray him was, if you watch the film, you'll see Adam wearing red plaid shirt quite a few times. Chuck always came to work, or most of the time he came to work in a red plaid shirt. So that is a homage to Chuck when you see Adam wearing those shirts.
Well, he pulled it off.
Yes, he did.
He did. So some people are asking about Patrice, and if Patrice was a real character in your life and in your investigation, Ron.
Answer is no. I had one encounter with the Black Student Union, and I might add, Spike toyed with the timeline in terms of this movie. For example, when you first see John David, you see him wearing a blue uniform, a police uniform, in the records section.
Mm-hmm.
I was 19 years old wearing a brown uniform when I was working in the records section. I never worked there when I was a police officer. So Spike took the 19-year-old me and put it in a 25-year-old John David for that scene, because I was 25 when the Klan investigation started in 1978. And in 1975, I had my encounter with Stokely Carmichael, or Kwame Ture, and that was my very first undercover assignment. And in 75, I attended a meeting of the Colorado College Black Student Union, in which they were protesting the Klan, and I invited other groups in the city who wanted to protest with them. And I basically stood in the back, monitored what was being said, made mental notes, went back to my office and wrote a report. I never had any verbal contact, physical contact with city Black Student Union person from that point on. And contrary to what the movie depicts, there were only probably 10, maybe 15 Black Student Union people in that meeting, not the big crowd you see in the room. So there was no Patrice.
There was no Patrice. And so we're seeing some of the embellishment was in that, that scene. Ron, how would you say that the film has, since the film, the last couple of years, has impacted your life? Seeing your story
Wow.
on the big screen.
Well, we're talking to 2 Academy Award winners. I never knew any Academy Award winners till this movie. And we're talking to 2 of them. And I've met the other 2. The film got 4 Golden Globe nominations. It got 6 Academy Award nominations, and it won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. Never imagined anything like that happening. My wife and I were sent to quite a few Hollywood events promoting the movie and whatnot, especially as it was leading up to the Oscar race. They wanted a physical presence there to connect the film to the voters. And we schmoozed with a lot of people in Hollywood, trying to get them to understand the film and hopefully garner their vote. We traveled all over the country. I met people that I never thought I would meet, Jordan, Spike, just the gamut of people. And we got to go to the Academy Awards. It's a lifetime of experience that we shared in about roughly a year's time. And we're very grateful for that. And when it hit the #1 New York Times bestseller list, I was taken away by that. I didn't know what to make of it. I never thought anything like that would happen. So I'm very pleased by all this, the acclaim that it got, both book and film, and I'm very happy.
Well, it's an incredible story. And I know when we were promoting this program tonight, a number of people said they didn't think it was a true story because it is so unbelievable. And we said, well, log on. We're going to have Ron Stallworth with us tonight. So we're really thrilled that you're with us. David and Charlie, we're getting some questions here about your next projects and what you're working on next, as well as some tips for budding screenwriters. If either of you or both of you could address that a bit.
Sure. We've written this script called Animal, which is based on the book by Casey Sherman, and that's one of those things where we've done our part and we're waiting. And what happened with BlacKkKlansman doesn't usually happen, where there's a script and then it just goes. And it was what was it? From the time we started reading the book to the time it was in theaters, it was about 3 years. That is lightning fast for Hollywood. In our case, we're working on Animal and a couple of other projects in various stages. And we just have to continue working and just be patient, because it's never going to happen that quickly again.
Hmm.
But in terms of advice, you know, the thing that we always say is this is something that you have to keep going at and get good at, and it takes a lot. And the number one thing is to not be so precious about your own work. Do a lot of it. If you aim to write even a bad script is better than no script, and you can build on a bad script and you can learn so much. So it's the most boring advice in the world, but it's the true advice. In order to do this, you have to just sit down and write.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. You got to be in it for the long haul. You have to really stick with it. Our situation, it's usually not going to work out this way, and that's okay. That's completely okay. You have to love it. You have to enjoy it. You got to work at it every single day. And I think you got to, you know, study the craft as much as possible, be it by reading scripts or watching movies in genres that you're interested in writing in.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much.
I might add to that.
Yes, please.
I am as proud as I am for the success that came my way, both in the book and the movie. I am doubly proud of the fact that these two young men were able to get this project going and ultimately ended up on the Academy Award stage. This is a remarkable story, and quite frankly, somebody ought to write this story and make a movie out of it, for the fact that they literally came from nowhere and produced an Academy Award or wrote an Academy Award winning screenplay. Hey, who would have thunk it?
Absolutely. And listen, we're thrilled. You're from East Brunswick. When we heard about it, we've all been following you and following the film. So I'm with you on that, Ron. Absolutely. And someone from East Brunswick, she wrote, I'm from East Brunswick, and have you considered getting the film into the Rutgers Jewish Film Festival? She writes. And as the director of the Rutgers Jewish Film Festival, I'll say, you know, we're having this conversation because the film is out there in streaming platforms, really for everyone to watch. And what we're trying to do is bring a more personal look behind the scenes at the film and give everyone a chance to really hear about what went into making it and to viewing it. If we'd had the inside track and we'd known Charlie and David then, and Ron, absolutely. But, you know, it's out there for the public and for everyone to watch. And we're really doing a different kind of conversation here. But thank you for that. And thank you for the plug for the film festival. Well, I'm going to thank everyone for participating tonight. Anna, I didn't know, did you have any last thoughts you wanted to add?
No, this was such a pleasure.
Okay.
It's really a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Someone's asking actually where the film is. So I'm sorry, I should have said that. It is, it's on Amazon Prime on streaming. And I think if you Google it, if you look at our website, we have various places there you can watch the film. I think it was a very small fee to watch it. Oh, someone says they found it on Netflix here. Thank you. So thank you all. Charlie, David, Ron, we really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Good luck with your next projects. Please keep us informed of what you're doing. You know, we'd love to have you back, love to promote it. And we feel like you're part of our Jewish Film Festival family now. And
Thank
hope
you
to
very
see you
much.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all
Appreciate
so
it.
much. Good night, everyone.
Nice.
Good night. Bye, Charlie. Bye, David.
Bye, Ron.
Lovely meeting you all.
Nice meeting
Yeah.
you. Karen, Nancy, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night.
So much for bringing us together. Bye.